I don't feel good about this teaching today.
Oh, I guess you're done.
Why? Because I came out with more questions than answers. Sometimes that happens. You get up here and you prepare all week and you go through the story and you're digging deep and you're just like, I don't have a whole lot of answers for you guys. So you're going to have to hear my questions as I read through this. But thankfully, we're at the end of Judges, or at least my time of teaching Judges. This is the last chapter, Judges 21. And we're dealing with the Israelites who have now defeated Benjamin, and Benjamin's depleted. There's not very many men left. And so now, what do we do about it? And so turn with me to Judges 21. I'm going to read verses 1 through 3 first. Now the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, "None of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife." Then the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening. They lifted up their voices and wept bitterly and said, "O Jehovah, God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel?" Didn't they just answer that? Didn't they just say they won't commit their children to marry the men of Benjamin? Now they're saying, why are they being depleted? Why are they disappearing? Why can't there be anything done about this? It's a pretty dumb question, and it shows the double-mindedness of the people. Let's continue on reading through Judges 21, starting at 4 through 15. So, it was on the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar there, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. The children of Israel said, "Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up from the assembly to Jehovah?" For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to Jehovah at Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin their brother, and said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by Jehovah that we will not give them our daughters as wives?" And they said, "What one is there from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to Jehovah?" And in fact, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out their 12,000 of their most valiant men and commanded them, saying, "Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including the women and children. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male and every woman who has known a man intimately." So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately. And they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is at the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin, who were at the rock of Rimmon, and announced peace to them. So Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead, and yet they had not found enough for them. And the people grieved for Benjamin, because Jehovah had made a void in the tribes of Israel. I had a couple questions as I read through this. One, go back to verse 4. So it was the next morning that the people rose early. Go back to 2. Verse 2. Then the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening. They lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. They called on God. So no one can say they didn't. They called on God. Let's go back to Judges 20 17 and 18, and let's see what's different there. Judges 20, 17 and 18. Now, besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of war. Then the children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God to inquire of God. They said, which of us shall go up first to the battle against the children of Benjamin? Jehovah said, Judah first. What was the difference between these two stories? They didn't get an answer. They got an answer in the story in chapter 20. They did not get an answer in 21. So that made me question, why didn't they get an answer? Were they supposed to wait for an answer? Was there something they were supposed to do that they knew they were supposed to do that they hadn't done? Another question. Why were they meeting in Bethel this time? They built an altar and did sacrifices, but why weren't they in Shiloh? Isn't this where God had placed his name at this time? Now, in the story that I just read in chapter 20, they were in Bethel, but the ark was there at the time because they were heading into a battle. I don't know if that's different, that it's okay to build an altar then, but the ark was there. They did build an altar and they did sacrifice to him at that time. So again, another question. and you see, as I'm reading, I see these questions and I'm coming across different settings and asking, why is this the thing that these people have decided to do? Why did they decide? Well, let me go on. So Jabesh Gilead is a city of Manasseh. It's on the northern border on the east side of the Jordan. So that's why it says Gilead, to let us know that it was on the eastern side of Jordan rather than the western side, because Manasseh was split into two, one on the east and one on the west. Jabesh Gilead was not the whole tribe of Manasseh. They asked the question, what tribe has not showed up here? And then they choose a small city that was not represented out of all the people. Again, was this God's choosing or was this man's choosing? They went and destroyed families. They killed children, and they killed men, and they killed women, all in the name of saving another brother. And there still was not enough women to go around. Let's continue reading through Judges 21, starting at verse 16 till we get to verse 24. Then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for wives for those who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed? And they said, there must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. However, we cannot give them wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel had sworn an oath, saying, cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. Then they said, in fact, there's a yearly feast of Jehovah in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebanon. Therefore, they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, go lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. And just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh. Then go to the land of Benjamin. Then it shall be, when their fathers or their brothers come to us to complain, that we will say to them, be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for any of them in the war. For it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty of your oath. And the children of Benjamin did so. They took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt the cities and dwelt in them. So the children of Israel departed from there. At any time, every man of his tribe and his family, they went out from there, every man to his inheritance. Again, a lot of more questions. We come to this and we see them scheming for Benjamin. We see people scheming to kidnap wives, going further down the road of chaos and destruction, rather than confess and repent for a foolish oath they made. I think they chose pride over peace. They chose pride of holding on to this oath that they made in haste rather than brotherly love. They schemed to commit murder, kidnapping, destroying families, and acting on their own authority. Sadly, the answer to my question is in Judges 21, all my questions through 25. This is why this happened. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Judges is a book about the people left to their own devices, not trusting in Jehovah and wanting to be in charge of their own destinies, using today's words, holding on to their own individual truths. I don't know if you've heard that said by people, but it's no different today. We all want to take charge of our own lives. We all want to be our own independent person. I'm not saying there's not a time for that. I'm not saying we shouldn't be individuals. But we can't allow ourselves to believe that we are here alone. We have a duty to take care of others. The book of Judges is a warning. If we do not ultimately trust God instead of our own abilities, we are living in chaos, doing whatever seems right in the moment. As I was reading through Judges, and especially these last 5 chapters, I kept saying, I don't understand why they keep going to the beginning after Joshua died, and that void that was left without a strong leader of Joshua. These last 5 chapters actually jump ahead to the beginning of Judges before the time of the Judges. And I kept saying, I don't understand why they put these stories at the end, but I think I'm starting to get it. The writer wanted us to understand that though the Judges were flawed, when they didn't have a leader, they did not have peace. If you look back and look through the time of the Judges, many of them were flawed, but it said they died and then there was no peace. They died and they went back. So remember, at least at the time of the Judges, there was some kind of peace. There was some kind of understanding of who God was. It may not have been perfect, not in any way, shape, or form, but it was much better than when there was nothing. Also, I think the writer didn't want the people to romanticize about the past when there was no leader after the void of Joshua's death. A lot of times we think back and we go, oh, it was so much better back then. But there's always problems. There's always something. And I think that this was proof that it wasn't better back then. It wasn't better when we were all leading ourselves and taking on things our own. I think Judges is the story of Numbers 16, 3 through 5, and I'd like you to turn back to that story of Numbers 16, verses 3 through 5. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and Jehovah is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Jehovah?" We don't need anyone in charge. We're good enough to do this on our own. We don't need you. You are taking it upon yourself and leading this people when you shouldn't be. That's the lie they're saying. And that's the lie we see in Judges, or at least in the end of Judges, the last 5 chapters. I think this was a time when there was people calling out for a king, and there were people saying, "No, we don't need a king. We're all holy enough." And so Judges was a book saying, "No, you're not." But let's continue on. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and Jehovah is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Jehovah?" So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, "Tomorrow morning, Jehovah will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him." I believe that the writer of Judges was taking that simple passage and showing the people why they needed a strong leader. You can call it a king, you can call it a judge, you can call it a man like Moses or Joshua. Whatever it is, it was a person that was to be the one for the nation to turn to when they had questions. It was someone they needed to go to, like Phineas. These people in chapter 21 had Phineas, a great high priest, who had seen some things. Instead of going to Shiloh and trying to find answers from him, they did it on their own. And the Lord didn't answer them. He didn't answer them. And they had to deal with something. And again, because there was no one in charge, it just was the group deciding, let's just do this. And if you read through that chapter again, you'll notice that it was just basically things that fell into their lap. Well, let's go defeat Jabesh Gilead. Oh wait, we got 400 virgins now. Let's give them to Benjamin. Oh, how are we gonna get the rest of them? I got an idea. Just hide in the bushes, and then you can kidnap who you want. This is not the way to make decisions. Thank you for your time. Shabbat Shalom.